Here we are going to discuss the solution of governing differential equation for single degree of freedom free damped vibrations. Alright, so here we have a single degree of freedom free damped vibrating system which comprises of a mass, a spring, and a damping, right? And a damper. We have the spring stiffness K and the damping coefficient C. Now, when we give a small displacement X to this mass and just leave it, then we all know that it is going to vibrate with some behavior, right? So what is the equation that governs the motion of that behavior is nothing but the governing differential equation, which is given by mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx is equal to 0, right? Where kx is the spring force, cx dot is the damping force, and we have mx double dot that comes because of the inertia force. All right, so this is the differential equation, and now we'll try to understand and find out what is the solution of this differential equation. We'll combine it in a sense that we'll look at both the mathematics part as well as the physical meaning of the solution that we are going to get. All right, so firstly what I'll do is just write this in the proper form, that is, this is d square x by dt square plus c dx by dt plus kx equal to 0. Now this is the way in which we are used to looking at differential equations. Now if I introduce the operator d, that is, let's suppose d by dt, and d square is d square by dt square, then what form will the equation look like is md square plus cd plus k operated on x equal to 0, right? This is how we rewrite the equation md square plus cd plus k operated on x equal to 0. Now to solve such equations, I'll just rewrite that equation over here, md square plus cd plus k operated on x equal to 0. Now what do we do to solve such equations? We write the auxiliary equation, right? We write the auxiliary equation. Now generally we write the auxiliary equation in terms of m, that is, we replace d with m, but here since m is already taken for mass, what I'll do is I'll replace d with s. So the auxiliary equation will be ms square plus cs plus k equal to 0. Alright, this will be the auxiliary equation, ms square plus cs plus k equal to 0. It is a quadratic equation, so it will have two roots. Suppose s1 and s2 are the two roots. So what are the roots going to be? So minus b minus c plus minus root of b square minus 4ac, so that is c square minus 4km upon 2a, so that is 2m, right? So this is what the root is going to be. Now I just do the division, so this is minus c by 2m plus minus, so as this 2m goes in the square root, it will be squared, so c square by 2m the whole square minus 4km upon 2m the whole square. So what will we get? We'll have minus c by 2m plus minus under root, so this is c by 2m the whole square minus, now this will be 4m square, numerator we have 4m, so 1m will remain in the denominator. Now what is k by m? We have natural frequency omega n is under root k by m, right? So we have k by m is omega n square, so I can write this down as minus c by 2m plus or minus under root c by 2m the whole square minus omega n square. Alright, so mathematically speaking, the differential equation is solved. Now depending on what is the value of the square root, we will end up with either real roots or complex roots, right? And then accordingly we will have the solution. So let's quickly just recap the solutions for different types of roots. So you can have either real and distinct roots, alright. So suppose s1 and s2 are the two roots which are real and unequal. So the solution will be of the form some constant a1 e raised to s1t plus some constant a2 e raised to s2t. Alright. Now if the roots are real and repeated, if we get real and repeated roots, so suppose S1 is equal to S2 and let's then say it is equal to S, then the solution should be of the form A1 plus A2t e raised to st. Alright, and then finally if you end up with complex roots, so if the roots are complex, so S1, 2 are of the form alpha plus minus I beta. Then what is the solution form? The solution form is e raised to alpha t a1 cos of beta t plus a2 sin of beta t. Right? So this is a solution form. This is what we have studied in differential equations. So when you have the real and distinct roots, the solution form is this. Real and repeated roots, you will have this as a solution form, and for complex roots, this will be the solution form. Now, by looking at these three solution forms, can you tell me which of them shows an oscillatory motion? Which of them show oscillatory motion? So quite clearly the one which has the presence of sine and cosine. Remember, one which has the presence of sine and cosine is going to be an oscillatory motion. So we are having an oscillatory motion happening over here. We'll have an oscillatory motion happening over here, right? And these two are not oscillatory. Right? These two are not oscillatory motion. That is, the mass will not go to and fro in this cases, but in this case, the mass will just continue to go to and fro. Right? Obviously, there is damping, so the motion will come to an end after some time. But then, while it is moving, it will be a to and fro motion for the third case. Alright. Whereas for the first two cases, it is not going to be a to and fro sort of motion. Alright. That is simply understood by the presence of sine and cosine terms. So these are going to be the solution forms. So now how do we physically try to understand when are we going to get which form, right? Physically when we see the system, we are having some value of mass, we are having some value of k, and then we'll be introducing some damping with coefficient c, and then if we were to know whether the system is going to be giving an oscillatory motion or not, so we should be in a situation to identify that, right? So that part is done with the help of a term known as critical damping. Alright. So we now introduce the term critical damping. So critical damping coefficient. Critical damping coefficient denoted as Cc. Now, when do the sort of roots get separated as real or complex is when the sign inside the square root is either positive or negative. So the critical is when the sign is the value is 0. The value of the square root is 0. That is a critical value. Alright. So I'll just equate c by 2m the whole square minus omega n square with 0. So we'll have c by 2m the whole square minus omega n square equal to 0. So this is going to be c by 2m equal to omega n, or c equal to 2m omega n. If I substitute for omega n now, so this is root of k by m, and then if m goes inside the square root, this is twice under root km. Now this value that we are looking over here, c equal to 2m omega n or twice root of km, this is nothing but the value of critical damping coefficient. What you should understand over here is that this value, twice root of km, does not depend on what damping has been provided to the system. I repeat, the value that we have just seen does not depend on what is the value of c that is provided to the system. What we got was twice under root km. Means what? It depends only on the value of m and k. It does not have anything to do with the value of c. Alright. So why are we calculating that value then? Why do we want to have that value to be known? Alright. So see, what we have found out is the value of critical damping coefficient. Now we can compare the actual damping coefficient c with the value of cc to determine what type of motion the system is going to perform. We will compare the value of damping that we are going to use with the value of cc so that we can understand what type of motion the system is going to perform, whether it will be oscillatory or not. Are you following it? Okay. So suppose this value of cc is equal to 10 units. Alright, this value of Cc is equal to 10 units. So I provide now to the system a damping of 10 units. Alright, the value of Cc is also 10 units and I have provided a value of C which is also equal to 10 units. Then what will happen to the discriminant? This discriminant is going to become 0. Right, this discriminant is going to become 0. And in that case, we'll be having real and equal roots. Real and equal roots, and then this is the solution form that we'll have. Correct? So when C is equal to Cc, we are ending up with such a solution form. Now, if instead of 10 units, I provide a C of suppose 12 units. If you provide a C of 12 units, then what is going to happen? Now the C value is more than the value of Cc. The C value is more than the value of Cc, right? So if the C is more than the value of Cc, then the discriminant will become positive. The discriminant will become positive. And if the discriminant is positive, then what we are going to have is real and distinct roots. Real and distinct roots. And for that, this is the solution form. And then the third possibility is, in this scenario, if I provide a C of 8 units, suppose, and Cc value is 10 units. So if C provided is less than the value of Cc, then the discriminant over here is going to become negative. We'll end up with complex roots, and for complex roots we are going to get oscillatory motion. Alright. So I think now there is some sort of confusion. How do we, what is C, what is Cc, and then how do you immediately recognize whether this is going to be positive, negative and all. So there is one more term which is introduced to make things simpler. We call that as the damping ratio. So we introduce another term, damping ratio. It is denoted as zeta, and this zeta is equal to C by Cc. This zeta is defined as the ratio of actual damping provided in the system to the critical damping of the system. What is critical damping coefficient? It is the value of twice root of Km. It depends on the spring and mass. Alright, and this is the actual value C. So depending on what damping we are providing in the system, the value of zeta will change. Alright, so now let me just quickly rewrite this entire thing in terms of zeta, and then I'll again explain you what I did with that 10 units, 12 units and all. Okay, so I'll explain to you once again with the help of zeta. So now this is how we are defining zeta. So zeta is equal to C by Cc. So let's do some manipulations now. So zeta is C by Cc, and we have just written C is this is Cc is 2m omega n. So this is 2m omega n. So can I say C by 2m is equal to zeta omega n? C by 2m is zeta into omega n. Now this is what we are having in our square root as well as outside the square root. So in the roots of our auxiliary equation, C by 2m is present. What I'll do now is just replace it with zeta into omega n. Alright. So therefore S12 will now become, so I'll just rewrite what we had written earlier and then substitute C by 2m the whole square minus omega n square. So just verify. This is what we had written earlier, C by minus C by 2m plus or minus C by 2m the whole square plus minus omega n square. And now just replace C by 2m with zeta omega n. So this is zeta omega n square minus omega n square. So this omega n square will come out as omega n, and then we have omega n common. This is minus zeta plus or minus under root zeta square minus 1. Alright. So these are the roots of the equation. These are the roots of the auxiliary equation. And now we'll once again quickly understand what is the meaning of critical damping and how we can compare the actual damping with critical damping and understand the type of motion. Alright. So I'll just write down the roots over here. S12 equal to omega n minus zeta plus minus under root zeta square minus 1 All right, and zeta is nothing but C by Cc. Right, zeta is nothing but C by Cc. Now I had given you an example, right? So suppose the system has a spring and mass such that Cc is equal to 10 units. All right, I'll just give that example again. So Cc is equal to 10 units. Now I decide to provide in the system a value of C which is equal to 12 units. A value of C which is equal to 12 units. So now can you tell me what is the value of zeta? So zeta, what you need to just know is whether it is more than 1 or less than 1, right? Because this square root is zeta square minus 1. So to decide the sign of it, you just need to know whether it is more than 1 or less than 1. So if C is equal to 12 units, then zeta is more than 1. Then zeta is more than 1. And so this square root will have a positive value inside it. And so we'll have a case of real and distinct roots. We'll have a case of real and distinct roots, and the solution will be of the form that we have discussed earlier. Now, if C that we provide to the system is equal to 10 units, which is equal to the value of Cc, then what will happen? Zeta will become equal to 1. So this square root will just go off, and you will have both the roots as real and equal. The roots will be real and equal. And then we'll have the solution form which you have written over here for real and equal or real and repeated roots. Alright. And then finally, if we choose to provide C, which is 8 units, alright, then what will happen? The value of zeta will be now less than 1. The zeta will be less than 1, and so this square root will now have a negative value inside it. So we'll end up with complex roots. And so the solution is now going to be of this form, which tells us that it is an oscillatory motion. So just by knowing what is the spring and the mass used in the system, we can calculate what is the value of critical damping coefficient, right? For example, in this case, we have taken it as 10 units. And then whether we are going to use a damping with coefficient more than 10 units or less than 10 units will decide what type of motion we are going to get. I hope you are getting the physical meaning of what these equations are telling us. Alright. And you have followed whatever mathematics has been there behind it. Okay. So that is the simple sort of physical meaning that you can associate with this. Now, why it is called critical damping? Because that is the minimum value, that is the least value for which you are going to have a non-oscillatory motion. Any value below that is obviously going to give you an oscillatory motion. So like we have in our example, if the value of Cc is 10 units, even if you provide a damping of 10.1 units, you're still going to have a non-oscillatory motion. Right? 12 units, 13 units, 15 units, whatever damping you provide, as long as it is more than Cc, you are going to have a non-oscillatory motion. But the moment you cross the value of Cc and go below it, so for example 9.9 units, then you are going to end up with oscillatory motion. Simply because the roots will become complex. Alright. So Cc is the critical value which decides, like you compare the value of actual damping with the value of Cc and decide what type of motion the system is going to perform. Alright. So now coming to the final solution. So we'll have 3 cases as we have already discussed. So case number 1 is when zeta is greater than 1, which implies C is more than Cc, and we call this system an overdamped system. This system is called an overdamped system. So what happens when zeta is more than 1 is the roots are real and distinct. So we'll have S1 equal to omega n minus zeta plus under root zeta square minus 1, S2 equal to omega n minus zeta minus under root zeta square minus 1. Alright, so these are the 2 roots, and so the solution will be, as we have written earlier, a1 e raised to s1t plus a2 e raised to s2t. Where do we decide a1 and a2 from? From the initial conditions of the system, right? So these are the arbitrary constants that are to be determined from the conditions that are given to us. Alright, so that is anyway required when you solve a numerical problem, but right now understand the type of motion that we are having. So x will be a1 e raised to s1t plus a2 e raised to s2t. Then what will be the second case? Second case is zeta equal to 1, that is c is equal to cc, and this is a critically damped system. This is a critically damped system. In this case, both the roots turn out to be equal because this square root just becomes 0, and zeta is equal to 1. So both the roots are equal to minus omega n. So just check, minus omega n, zeta is 1 and this is 1. Alright, so that is how we get the two roots to be equal to minus omega n, and then the solution type will be a1 plus a2t e raised to minus omega n t. Alright, or that is e raised to st we write, so that is minus omega n t. So this is a solution when you have a critically damped system, that is zeta equal to 1. Then comes the third case, when zeta is less than 1, that is c is less than cc, and we call it a underdamped system. It is called a underdamped system. Underdamped system. Alright, so in this case what happens to the roots? So S12 will be omega n minus zeta plus or minus, we have this, right, zeta square minus 1, but now we know that zeta is less than 1. So what we do is, what we'll do is take a square root of minus 1 outside as I and write it now as 1 minus zeta square. Alright, so this is now the root of the auxiliary equation, omega n minus zeta plus or minus I times under root 1 minus zeta square. So it was zeta square minus 1, I have taken square root minus 1 outside as I, and then this is 1 minus zeta square. Alright, so can we separate it into real and imaginary parts now? So therefore S12 is minus zeta omega n plus minus I times omega n under root 1 minus zeta square. Alright, so this is like your alpha plus minus I beta. So what is the solution form then going to be? So the solution will be x equal to e raised to alpha t, so e raised to minus zeta omega n t into, sorry, not c, I'll use a1 cos of beta t. What is beta? Beta is omega n under root 1 minus zeta square plus a2 sine of beta t. Oh, sorry, there is a t over here. Sine of beta t. Beta is omega n under root 1 minus zeta square into t. Alright, so this is the solution when you have an underdamped system, that is zeta less than 1. Now once again, to sort of make it convenient to write, we define a new sort of frequency that is called a damped natural frequency. So we define a frequency called damped natural frequency, or you can simply call it as damped frequency omega d, which is omega n root of 1 minus zeta square, just to make it convenient to write. And obviously this is the frequency omega n under root 1 minus zeta square with which the oscillation is going to happen. Alright, so if this system was an underdamped system, so if there is no damping, then we know that the spring mass system will oscillate with the frequency of omega n. But if there is a damping and if it is an underdamped system, then it will oscillate with the frequency omega d. Hence it is called the damped natural frequency of the system, and its value is omega n under root 1 minus zeta square. So we'll just rewrite this solution now. We'll rewrite the solution. X equal to e raised to minus zeta omega n t we have A1 cos omega d t plus A2 sin omega d t. Alright. So now what we are having is two arbitrary constants A1 and A2. What I'll try to now do is replace it with two another arbitrary constants and try to get the solution in some better form so that it can be physically understood. Alright. So I'll just replace A1 and A2 with the help of some manipulations now. So what I'll do is just multiply and divide by under root A1 square plus A2 square. Alright. Just multiply and divide by under root A1 square plus A2 square. Anyway, these arbitrary constants A1 and A2 are calculated with the help of initial conditions. Alright. So it's okay if we replace them with another arbitrary constants. So what I want to do now is A1 upon under root A1 square plus A2 square and A2 upon under root A1 square plus A2 square. I'll replace them with a new constant. So for that I'll just construct a triangle. I'll just construct a right angle triangle. Right. Let's suppose this side is A1, this side is A2. And what is this side? This is root of A1 square plus A2 square. Now what I want to do is I want to replace A1 upon root of A1 square plus A2 square as sine of phi. So I just mark an angle phi like this. Alright. You need not worry about all this. I'm just explaining you, otherwise you will just get confused. Where did A1 and A2 go and where did the new constant phi come from? Alright. So what is now A1 upon the square root A1 square plus A2 square? It is sine phi. Alright. So this is e raised to minus zeta omega n t as it is. This A1 upon this part, I am writing it as sine phi. And this is cos omega dt as it is. Plus, now what is A2 upon root of A1 square plus A2 square? That will become cos phi. And sine of omega d t. And then there is this into A1 square plus A2 square. So let's suppose this is equal to x, capital X. Let's suppose this is equal to capital X. So this is multiplied with x now. So I'll just put that x over here. I'll just mark that x over here. Capital X into this entire thing. Alright. So this can now be replaced as what? This is the formula of sine of a plus b. Right. So this is equal to x e raised to minus zeta omega n t. And then this is nothing but sine of omega dt plus phi. So this is the solution of the underdamped system. This is the solution of the underdamped system. So what I have just done is I have replaced A1 and A2, which were the two arbitrary constants, with two new arbitrary constants x and phi. So this x and phi should be determined from the initial conditions. Alright. But now this is a better form to look at. So what we understand is the presence of sine term implies that there is an oscillatory motion. And what is happening is that this amplitude of vibration. So if you just compare it with this thing, a solution of a free undamped system. The free undamped system looks something like this. The free undamped system, the solution looks something like this. So now we can just nicely compare the two solutions. What we have is the free undamped system vibrates with the frequency of omega n, whereas this is going to be vibrating with the frequency of omega d. Correct? And the free undamped system had a constant amplitude of vibration. That amplitude was never changing. But here now what is happening is the amplitude is going to change with time. There is a term of time over here, right? And it is going to decrease exponentially. That amplitude of vibration is going to decrease exponentially. Alright. So two things that are different from the solution of the free undamped system is that the amplitude is not constant. It will now decrease exponentially with time. And the frequency of vibration is omega d and not omega n. Alright. I hope everybody has followed the solution of free damped system. Alright. Free damped system of vibration. Alright. So I'll just quickly recap whatever we have seen. What we have is for a given spring mass and damping system, the differential equation or the governing differential equation is this. So we rewrote it in forms of md square plus cd plus k operated on x equal to 0. We wrote the auxiliary equation, found out the roots, and then we just recapped what we have studied in differential equations is based on the type of roots, what sort of solution form we are going to have. We concluded that the presence of sine and cosine term means that it is an oscillatory system, whereas these two are non-oscillating systems. Alright. Now physically, if you want to classify or identify whether the given system of vibration will be oscillating or not, what we did is introduced a critical damping coefficient Cc. Mathematically, the difference between real and complex roots is when the sign of the value inside the square root is positive or negative, right? So we took the critical case of 0. So we equated this c by 2m the whole square minus omega n square to 0. And from there we got the value of critical damping coefficient, right? This is an important term for free damped vibrating system, alright? Critical damping coefficient, alright? And then this value of Cc depends only on the spring and the mass of the system. It does not depend on what damping is provided, alright? In fact, what damping is provided then decides what will be the type of motion and what will be the type of system, underdamped, overdamped, etc. Alright. So to understand further, we introduce another term which is damping ratio zeta, which is the ratio of C by Cc, actual damping upon critical damping. So we got the solution in terms of zeta then. So we ended up with this omega n into minus zeta plus minus root of zeta square minus 1. And then from there we saw that whether the value of zeta is more than 1 or less than 1 will decide whether we are getting real roots or complex roots. Alright. And the value at which that change happens is zeta equal to 1, which is called the critical damping coefficient. Alright, which is the critical damping coefficient. So if zeta is more than 1, we call it a overdamped system, and it has a solution like this, where S1 and S2 are given in this manner. When zeta is equal to 1, it is called a critically damped system. The solution is like this. The most important case when we are studying vibrations is to study when the oscillations are actually happening. The first two cases are non-oscillating systems. Alright. So this is the one which interests us more when we are studying vibrations, that is the underdamped system. In this case, you have complex roots, and then that zeta square minus 1 is just changed to 1 minus zeta square, and this is multiplied with I. So then we compare it with the form alpha plus minus I beta and wrote down the solution. Alright. From here, we identified that the frequency of oscillation is this. The frequency of oscillation is this. So we introduced another term, that is damped natural frequency, omega d, that is omega n into under root 1 minus zeta square. Alright. And then we did some manipulation so that the solution can be written and compared with another solution of free undamped system. So we ended up with this solution, that is x e raised to minus zeta omega n t sine of omega dt plus phi. Alright. And then this tells us that it is an oscillating motion with the amplitude which decays exponentially. Alright. And the frequency of oscillation will be omega d. Alright. So this is how the solution of single degree of freedom free damped system is obtained. I hope you have followed what is the mathematics involved and what that mathematics is meaning physically. Alright. So now let's compare the various solutions that we have obtained. So I've just listed the solutions that we have obtained so far for overdamped system, critically damped system, underdamped system, and I've also written the solution for an undamped system. Alright. Here A1 and A2 are the arbitrary constants, whereas here X and Phi are the arbitrary constants which have to be determined from initial conditions. Okay. So for the overdamped system, what did we have? We have zeta which was more than 1. Alright. And for the critically damped system, zeta will be equal to 1. For the underdamped system, zeta was less than 1. And what will be zeta for an undamped system? So what is the value of C for an undamped system? It is 0, right? So for an undamped system, zeta will be 0. For an undamped system, zeta will be 0. Alright. Now what is found out experimentally is that the critically damped system, that is zeta equal to 1, reaches the equilibrium position the fastest or in the shortest possible time. Okay, so if we have the same system with very similar initial conditions, one subjected to an overdamping, other subjected to critical damping, one subjected to an underdamping, and an undamped system, then what you will find out is that the critically damped system will reach or will stop moving in the shortest possible time. Alright, that is why essentially we are using damping to stop the vibrations. So a critically damped system is the one which reaches an equilibrium in the shortest possible time. That is what is found out. Then an overdamped system also reaches the equilibrium in along an exponential manner as the solution suggests, right? Because what we have is an exponential decay. It becomes asymptotic, so it will take infinitely long time. But then, practically speaking, when the vibrations are very small, the amplitude of vibration is very small, we can say that it is practically come to rest. All right. Then what is to be noted is that for both overdamped and critically damped system, we don't have any to and fro motion happening. All right. So whatever displacement is there, it just comes to an equilibrium position from there. It does not cross the mean position. Then for the underdamped system, what do we have for amplitude over here is, there is an exponential term. So this green dotted line is marking the exponential, that is e raised to minus eta omega n t. You just mirrored it on both the sides because this sign term will become positive and negative alternately. So just mirror image of that curve is this one which you see in the lower part of the graph. And then the actual position x will just be bounded within those green curves. And that is how we see the response of an underdamped system. Whereas for an undamped system, what you have is the amplitude just remains constant. So it is never going to change with time. It is just a constant amplitude. It will never come to rest. Alright. Whereas in case of underdamped system also, it will come to rest after a certain time. That is what we can say practically, that the amplitude will become infinitely small. So we can say that it is coming to rest practically. Okay, another thing to note that is the vibrating frequency for the underdamped system is omega d, right? It is vibrating with omega d, whereas an undamped system is vibrating with omega n. Now what relation did we see for omega d? Omega d is omega n into under root 1 minus zeta square. So whatever value of zeta you put, omega d is always less than omega n. Whatever value of zeta you have from 0 to 1, omega d will always be less than omega n. Zeta more than 1 does not apply because this term itself is not valid then, right? This zeta equal to or more than 1 does not have any vibratory response. So there is no such term as omega d when zeta is more than 1 or equal to 1. Alright, this relation is valid only when zeta is less than 1. And whenever it is less than 1, omega d will be always less than omega n. That is what mathematically it implies. Alright. So if omega d is less than omega n, what can you say about time period then? So time period for damped system will be more than time period of an undamped system. Or I'll just write down Td will be more than Tn. Alright. So that we can see on the graph also. So if you just observe it, so we can see that if I try to mark the time period. So these are two locations of, so this is one. Alright, I'll just make it darker. So here we have one time period. This is Td. And a similar time period we can mark for the undamped system. So let's suppose we take two similar points over here. So here is a time period of the undamped system. This is Tn. So Td will be more than Tn. That is what we follow from this expression, omega d is equal to omega n under root 1 minus zeta square. And a few other things to note that where the amplitude decreases in all the three damped systems. It reaches to its equilibrium position the fastest or in the shortest possible time for the critically damped system. Overdamped system, there is no vibration, but then it takes infinitely long, theoretically infinitely long to reach zero. The same is the case for underdamped system, but what we have for an underdamped system is a vibration which is happening. So it is a vibratory or oscillatory motion. Practically, after the amplitude becomes infinitesimally small, we can say that it has come to rest. And for an undamped system, the amplitude remains constant. It does not change with time. Okay. And as far as time periods go for the two vibrating systems, the damped system will have a longer time period as compared to an undamped system. Okay. So this is how the solutions compare and the various damped systems, that is overdamped, critically damped and underdamped systems have their responses. Alright. So we'll now move on to another important topic, that is logarithmic decrement. Alright. So what do we mean by logarithmic decrement? So here again I have a graph of response of an underdamped system, that is x versus t now, and a logarithmic decrement is defined as the natural log of two successive amplitudes of vibration of an underdamped system. I repeat, logarithmic decrement is defined as the natural log of two successive amplitudes of vibrations of an underdamped system. So what do I mean? So you can select any two time instants on this graph. So let's suppose we select one time instant over here. Let's suppose this is t1 and corresponding there is an amplitude x1, and when we say consecutive amplitudes, it means that the two time instants should be separated by one time period of vibration. Alright, so we should look at another time instant which is after one cycle. So after having completed one cycle, so somewhere over here you should have your next time instant, something like this. So let's suppose this is t2, and then you should have from here till here. Okay, so this is suppose x2. So what I mean to say is, when you say consecutive amplitudes from here till here, you should have one time period. You should have one time period. Alright, so this will be one time period TD. Alright, I hope everybody is following it. What is logarithmic decrement? It is the ratio of natural log of ratio of two successive amplitudes of a vibrating system which is an underdamped vibrating system. Okay, so when you say logarithmic decrement, okay, it is denoted by delta. It is denoted as delta, and delta is nothing but natural log of two consecutive amplitudes of vibration. Two consecutive amplitudes of vibration of an underdamped system. So we have delta equal to log of x1 by x2. So x1 is the amplitude of vibration at time t1, x2 is the amplitude of vibration at time t2, and x1 upon x2, log of that is nothing but logarithmic decrement. Your t1 and t2 should be separated by one time period. They should be separated by one time period. You can select any such two time instants which are separated by one time period. Alright. So now let's try to get the expression for delta then. This is log of x1 by x2. What is x for an underdamped system? What is x for an underdamped system? It is capital X e raised to minus zeta omega n t sine of omega d t plus phi. Alright. This is what we have x. So what will be x1? So this x that we have written is this green curve that is following over here. So x1 is nothing but the value at time t equal to t1. So for x1 what I should do is put t equal to t1 in this expression. So x1 will be nothing but e raised to minus zeta omega n t1 sine of omega d t1 plus phi. And what about x2? In very similar manner, this should be e raised to minus zeta omega n t2 sine of omega d t2 plus phi. Alright. So what I'll do is first take just simplify the ratio of x1 by x2 and then do the natural log. So what should we have for x1 upon x2 is, this is x e raised to minus zeta omega n t1 sine of omega d t1 plus phi divided by x e raised to minus zeta omega n t2 sine of omega d t2 plus phi. Alright, so x gets cancelled. We have e raised to minus zeta omega n t1 minus t2. Can we write it this way? I think you are following this. E raised to minus zeta omega n and then t1, this t2 goes to the numerator, so that will become minus t2 in the exponent, and then we have sine of omega d t1 plus phi upon sine of omega d. Now can I write t2 as t1 plus td? Can we write t2 equal to t1 plus td, right? So what we'll have is t2 is t1 plus td plus phi. Okay, so now a couple of simplifications that are going to happen now. So first is this t1 minus t2 with a minus sign. Alright, so this is nothing but t2 minus t1. And what is t2 minus t1? T2 minus t1 is nothing but td. T2 minus t1 is nothing but td. So I can write down, this is e raised to zeta omega n, and the green part that I have written is nothing but, that is td. So part which I have underlined with green is nothing but td. And what happens in the other part of the expression, this is omega d t1 plus phi upon sine of omega d t1 plus omega d td plus phi. Okay, now what will be the product of omega d into td? What will be the product of omega d into td? What is td? td is nothing but 2 pi by omega d, right? 2 pi by omega d. So td into omega d is nothing but 2 pi. td into omega d is nothing but 2 pi. So in the next step, what I'll do is replace this with 2 pi. Alright. So we have x1 upon x2 equal to e raised to zeta omega n td sine of omega d t1 plus phi upon sine of omega d t1 plus phi plus 2 pi. Alright. So what we have done, this omega d into td is replaced with this 2 pi. Okay. So now from trigonometry, what is sine of 2 pi plus alpha? It is equal to sine alpha. So both numerator and denominator are the same. Both numerator and denominator are the same. So what we end up with is e raised to zeta omega n td. Alright. This is x1 upon x2. Now what we want is delta, that is log of x1 upon x2. So therefore delta will be log of x1 upon x2. So that is log of e raised to zeta omega n td. So this will become zeta omega n td. This is nothing but zeta omega n td. Alright. So delta is nothing but zeta omega n td. Now what is td? I'll just use this relation, td equal to 2 pi by omega d. So this is zeta omega n into 2 pi by omega d. Alright. And what is omega d? So we have delta equal to zeta omega n into 2 pi by omega d is nothing but omega n under root 1 minus zeta square. It is omega n under root 1 minus zeta square. Alright, so omega n gets cancelled and we are left with 2 pi zeta upon under root 1 minus zeta square. This is the expression for logarithmic decrement delta. This is the expression for logarithmic decrement delta. Another important expression as far as underdamped systems go. Alright. So what this tells us is that this is the ratio of successive amplitudes. Right? This is a ratio of successive amplitudes of vibration. And what you see is for a given system, for a given system means what? Once you have a spring, mass and damper, the value of zeta is fixed, right? So this value is never going to change. This value is never going to change. So this delta is a constant. This delta is a constant, right? This delta is a constant for the given system. Delta is a constant for a given system. Don't get confused. See, the amplitude is not remaining constant. The amplitude is going to continuously decrease. But the ratio of any two amplitudes is constant. The ratio of any two amplitudes is constant. Alright. So the amplitude is decreasing, but the ratio of two successive amplitudes will remain constant. That is what this delta is telling us. I hope you are following this. And now just a small extension of this logarithmic decrement. That is ratio of amplitudes which are separated by n cycles. What we have so far seen is ratio of amplitudes which are separated by one cycle. Alright, we have just considered one cycle. Now we are looking at ratio of amplitudes which are going to be separated by n cycles. Okay, so what I am talking about is x1 upon xn plus 1. Alright, what we saw earlier was x1 upon x2. Now we are looking at is x1 upon xn plus 1. So can we write this down as x1 upon x2 into x2 upon x3 into x3 upon x4 into xn upon xn plus 1. Right? This can simply be written in this way. Now if we take log on both sides, so this will be log of x1 upon xn plus 1 equal to, this becomes log of x1 upon x2 plus this will be log of x2 upon x3 plus log of x3 upon x4 and we'll have log of xn upon xn plus 1. Alright. So what is this term? Log of x1 upon x2. This is log of ratio of two successive amplitudes. This is nothing but logarithmic decrement delta. How about this? Log of x2 upon x3. This is again successive amplitudes. So this again is delta. Similarly, the third term is also delta. And like that, we have how many terms? We have n terms. We'll have n such terms. So this is nothing but n times delta. This is nothing but n times delta. So what we get is then eventually x1 upon xn plus 1 will be e raised to n times delta. Alright, it will be equal to e raised to n times delta, where delta is nothing but the logarithmic decrement 2 pi zeta upon under root 1 minus zeta square. Alright, so this is also another sort of relation that we have. Now this logarithmic decrement, one way of using this expression would be to physically determine or practically determine what is the damping used in a system. Alright, so you can very well measure the mass and the spring stiffness, alright, by simple experimental procedures. Now if we also have a damper whose damping coefficient is unknown, alright, then what we can do is we can simply set up a experiment where we measure the amplitudes of vibration of that underdamped system, and it is not very easy to measure just two consecutive amplitudes. So you would like to measure amplitudes which are separated over certain number of cycles. Let's suppose 5 cycles or 10 cycles like that. Alright. So once we have measured those ratios, so that is suppose like if we have taken 10 cycles in between. So we have measured x1 and x11. Right. For 10 cycles, that is n equal to 10. So we have measured x1 and x1 and x11. We have those values over here. We have the value of n. So we can find out delta from there. And from delta, we can find out what is the value of zeta. From delta, we can find out what is the value of zeta. And what was zeta? Zeta is nothing but C upon Cc that we have seen. Zeta is nothing but C upon Cc. What was Cc? Cc is twice under root Km. So once you know the value of zeta, you already know the value of K and M for the system. What you can do is find out the value of the damping coefficient. So this way you can use this logarithmic decrement to simply find out what is the damping coefficient of the system experimentally. All right. And you can expect certain numerical questions also based on this logarithmic decrement or ratio of amplitudes that are separated by n cycles, and also whatever we have discussed earlier regarding the solutions. You can expect theory questions maybe on this sort of graph, what we have seen. All right. Or you can expect certain theory questions on the previous part, that was on what is the meaning of critical damping coefficient, why it is called that way, and what does it physically imply, all those sort of things.